welcome to the 318 Lightning Strike Raider Guide. Before I get into the main guide, I just wanted to show a quick showcase map for people that are thinking about playing a build to see where you can get with a decent investment. Now the character you're going to see is between 20 to 40x invested depending on what you craft yourself and what you buy, but to get the build up and running and mapping and killing Guardians and Conquerors, it was around 2 to 3x last league, and there's no reason it won't be the same this league. For those that are experienced in the build anyway, feel free to skip to the next section. But for those wanting to know what this character might look like when he's spec'd out, then have a quick look at this showcase.
In the wake of your power, something has arisen. Dark Sentinels, hungry for a share.
Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy Ducksy Gaming and the 318 Sentinel guide for the Lightning Strike Raider. Now, although nothing has changed balance-wise, there's plenty of gear and tree improvements that have been made since the last guide, so I thought it only right that we go again. So the guide is going to be quicker than the last one. If you want to know the in and outs of playing Lightning Strike interactions, I'd recommend checking out parts of the 317 video. All the bits are timestamped. But this guide itself is going to be split up into a few different timestamped sections. Firstly, is this build for you and the pros and cons? Second, how to level the build. Third, how to progress when you hit maps. The next section is going to look at the final gear you want to aim for a decent all-round character, the skill tree, and the Pantheons. And then the last one is just going to be some gameplay examples of different stages of the build, so you know what you're getting yourself into if you decide to play this build. So the footage will all be from a playthrough I did from scratch in SSF, and then I migrated it in trade when I wanted to go to a 6-link because it might have taken me forever to find one in SSF. But all the gear that's going to be on the character is going to be stuff that I've crafted through essences that I've farmed. So firstly, let's talk about whether this build is likely to be for you, because I don't want to waste people's time if it's not the kind of build that they're looking for. So this build levels really easily in the campaign and it hits the ground running on a 4-link in maps. But realistically, if you want a quick and smooth league start, you need to level with Spectral Helix, as Lightning Strike is really not a good skill at all until you get a few factors into play that we'll come on to later in the gearing section. Helix is easily the quickest and most efficient way to level and map early, and I'll try to include a little bit at the end of the video of really how to play Helix so that you progress quickly. So the build itself really only comes to life in terms of T16 farming once you've got a few pieces of gear, a 6-link, and the Uber Lab done. The gear is nothing expensive, it's probably going to be 2 to 3x a league start, so nothing insane, and that should see you through to doing pinnacle bosses, T16 farming, and you'll be able to take on, Guardians and Conquerors. So the build itself does feel a little bit clunky until you get at least Uber Lab done, as this gives a massive boost to attack speed, damage, and movement speed. And due to this, the progression can be slower than other builds, and I will come onto that again in a later section. So in summary, if you want a build that's going to boss on a 5-link rush in on day one, then this is 100% not the build for you. But if you do want a really fun and proven all-round build that just gets better and better the more you pump into it, then it might be a build you want to consider. Okay, so let's move on to how to level the build in Axe. Now, there's a detailed guide I put out last league, and most of that is still relevant. So if this is a bit light for you, I recommend going to check out that guide. A very few things have changed in terms of the way I recommend leveling, but what it will do is explain exactly act to act, certainly for the first 5 acts, how to go about leveling. But in summary, in Act 1, up to level 12, you've got 2 options. You can either go bows or you can go two-handed weapons. If you go bows, the benefit is that you get all the gear on the beach anyway, so you don't have to spend a couple of wisdom scrolls that might be valuable getting items. So if you want to go bows, you're going to go for a 3 green link, which is going to be Galvanic Arrow, Mirage Archer, and Onslaught. And then you're going to supplement that with a 2 link of Shrapnel, Ballista, and Pierce. If you end up with another 3 link, you can add Chance to Bleed, added cold, or added fire damage onto this Shrapnel Ballista. Now, you are going to dump this setup at level 12 anyway, so it's up to you whether you want to go this way, or probably the more traditional way would be two-handed weapons with Splitting Steel linked with Onslaught, and then for supplemental damage, you have a War Banner. In this setup as well, you can run a Decoy Totem, which just makes boss fights really easy because they just focus on the totem. So whatever setup you choose, you're going to be a two-hander with Helix at level 12 anyway, once you can buy the gem in town. So if you'd rather start going two-handed from the start, go for it. But if you'd rather keep that currency and go bows, which in all honesty, bow DPS is probably slightly better and easier for Brutus. But, you know, as long as you're soft core, if you die, you die. It's not the end of the world. So from here, I would carry on using two-handed weapons. Previously, I recommended switching to claws at level 12, but you don't really need to because I've rejigged the tree slightly so that we don't pick up any claw nodes really until Act 5. So what you're looking for is a two-handed weapon, something like a bastard sword or something, or a long sword, something that's got fairly decent attack speed on it. And then if you get any essences, they go on the weapon. Now, don't swap to claws until you get one with either one fairly decent Ellie roll or a couple of mediocre elemental rolls. And when you switch to claws, you can either dual wield, or if you only get one good claw, go claw and shield. There's no point dual wielding if one claw is really good and one is just a base claw. Now, once you kill Brutus, for prison you want to take Whirling Blades as your reward and then level this for later. When you get to the end of Act 1, your ideal links are going to be Helix, Onslaught, and Added Cold. You're going to have a dash and you're going to have a decoy totem. That is honestly all that you need. Once you get to Act 2 and you've completed the first quest where you get the gem, get Herald of Ice as your reward and then buy either Herald of Lightning or Herald of Thunder, whatever it's called. Or if you don't have the int, try and run Skitterbox. You want 2 Ellie auras because it just boosts the damage massively. So you're going to either be running Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder, or you're going to be running Herald of Ice and Skitterbox. Also, if you've got a currency, buy Blood Rage for frenzy charges and attack speed. This helps a lot, especially if you've not moved to claws yet, because your only movement skill is a dash. So if you can then get Blood Rage, which gives you frenzy charges make you move that little bit quicker. Once you kill Weaver, take faster attacks and link this to Whirling Blades once you switch to claws. As I said, you're in no rush to switch to claws. If you've got a really good two-handed weapon, don't switch to claws until you either get a better claw or that weapon just becomes really, really out-leveled. So your final links to Act 2 are going to be Helix, Onslaught, and Added Cold, Herald of Ice, and either Skitterbox or Herald of Thunder, Blood Rage, Decoy Totem, Dash, and if your claws, Whirling Blades and faster attacks. When you're on the lookout for weapons to upgrade, this build scales Ellie damage. So anything with any flat Ellie damage on it is good because we're going to scale it with a lot of increased. This combined with the Heralds gives you plenty of damage early on. Once you get to Act 3, you can pick up Anger as your aura and then drop either Herald of Lightning or Skitterbox, and then you're going to run Anger and the Herald of Ice for your damage auras. At this stage, there's not really any good curses or marks worth picking up until we get Ellie weakness in Act 6, because Sniper's Mark makes Spectral Helix behave really badly. As soon as it hits the enemy, the Helix flies off, whereas if it doesn't, you might have a chance of hitting the boss, you know, an extra time or an extra 2 times on the rotation. So the final 4 links that you're looking for, these gems can be obtained as soon as you find your first 4 link. Your ideal colours are green, green, blue, red, and the gems will be Helix, Onslaught, Trinity, and Ellie damage with attacks. Now, auras, as I said, it's up to you. Once you get your increased reservation wheel, the most comfiest leveling is Anger and Purity of Elements because you don't have to worry too much about resistances and you're immune to all ailments. But feel free to run Grace if you want to, or go Glass Cannon and run Wrath and Anger. If when you first get your 4-link Trinity isn't proccing, swapping auras should fix it. So if you're running Anger, drop Anger and run Wrath temporarily. You're not going to be able to level Wrath up as high because of the imp requirements, but we're really only using it to make sure Trinity procs and gets us all that extra damage. Once you complete your first lab and we get Frenzy charges, you can drop Blood Rage if you really dislike using it, but it still gives you attack speed and leech. Now we're going to fast forward on to Act 6 because nothing happens before then because you've got your setup. When you hit Act 6, you've now got Nessa as a vendor either in your hideout or in Act 6, and you can start filling out the rest of your gems. One thing you definitely want to do is swap Ancestral Protector for Decoy Totem and Flame Dash for Dash. Now once you start picking up crit nodes towards the end of leveling, drop Onslaught for Nightblade support. The first time you get offered a Diamond Flask, take it as it boosts our crit up. Once you decide to slot Nightblade, which you can do because even with no crit nodes, you're still probably going to get elusive proc in, you are going to drop Onslaught and put in Nightblade support. As I said, you're going to go back to Act 1 and you're going to buy Withering Step and you're going to assign this to your move only. What this does is you're elusive when you use Nightblade. Let's say you hit for 150%. That just ticks all the way down to 0. There's no way of reprocking it and there's no way of stopping that degradation. If you get Withering Step, what that does is it basically removes your buff from your Nightblade so that when you come to attack an enemy again, you don't have a Nightblade buff, so you get the full buff again when you attack an enemy. This is the reason we're going Flame Dash, and it's the reason we take the increased cooldown and movement speeds at the bottom of the tree, because you're still going to need a skill to get over gaps or get yourself out of trouble that Whirling Blades can't do. Flame Dash has 2 charges, Dash has 1. So as long as you don't use it other than panic situations or gaps, you should always have a Flame Dash available. Now at this stage, if you're going crit, this is when you want to get your res capped without Purity of Elements. You can then move on to the endgame auras of Precision, Grace, and Anger, or stick with Wrath for Trinity reasons. When you do this, you're going to need to take the Grace Mastery for 25% reservation and a Precision Mastery for 100% reservation. Once you move to the crit variant, Ellie Weakness becomes subpar. Drop it, run Mark on Hit and Assassin's Mark. And if you can fit the extra link in, Life Tap really helps with this because it's quite mana hungry. So that's kind of everything you need, really. The other gems like your castle and damage taken and stuff, they're not really mandatory. And Axe, I don't think I even had them till around I was doing tier 6 or 7 maps because I didn't find good gear with the right colours. So your final links that you want to look for, and you should have most of them in play when you kill Kataba, going to have a 4-link of Helix, Nightblade, Ellie damage with attacks, and Trinity. Going to have an Ancestral Protector with Culling Strike as an optional support gem. Going to have Blood Rage again optional. Your auras are going to be Anger, Precision, Grace. You're going to have your secondary movement skill of Flame Dash. You're going to have a Withering Step assigned to your move only. You're going to have your main movement skill of Whirling Blades and faster attacks. And then your mark setup of Assassin's Mark, Mark on Hit, and Life Tap. If you miraculously find the room to fit in your castle and damage taken setup as well, go for it. The one thing I will say is really it does not matter where any of the skills go. Not at any point in this build are we going to have to slot certain things in certain slots other than the 6-link obviously needs to go in the chest. There's a couple of things to note about leveling before we move on. Unless you get really lucky with gear, you're going to have no more than 2.5k life when you finish the axe. Likely is you're probably around 2.2k. Now don't worry. Same as if you only have, 1,000 life, 1.1k life when you kill Kataba. That's pretty normal if you haven't found life gear. What we're doing is we're trying to front load damage as much as we can, because in softcore, my aim is really to get through the campaign as quickly as possible and get to the more interesting content. It is just the downside of being a ranger. Even with the more life nodes that we have on the tree, we still don't get access to a ton unless we really spread our tree really, really thin. So the last thing is, I do see lots of people complaining about Helix as a skill in both the campaign and maps. They're saying it's clunky, they keep dying. It is clunky, but I've seen some people play and they just don't use the skill properly. The way you want to use Helix is it's not a skill where you stand still, spin the Helix, move, stop, spin it. You want to do it as you move. You almost want to do it at a stutter step. So as you're running through a campaign area, like in the footage in the background, couple of Helix, keep moving, couple of Helix, keep moving. Use your movement skill between packs. couple of Helix keep moving. Just getting this sort of rhythm going. If it's not something you've done before, you'll probably cut hours off of your campaign by doing this. Helix will mop up mobs behind because it will rotate and rotate and rotate. The only issue with this is you might miss loot. So what I would recommend on your loot filter is anything you 100% want to pick up, have it have a distinctive sound so that you know every now and again you need to go back. It's not worth, for the odd drop, you standing there waiting for all of your enemies to die. As I said, playing in this manner will shave a lot of hours off of your leveling process if you're someone that doesn't get, sub 6 hours, sub 5 hours. The only time I stop is if there's a juicy blue pack or, like a strongbox one to open or an essence monster. Other than that, I kind of don't even pay attention to monsters. All I'm looking to do is get from point A to point B in a campaign zone as quickly as I can, and I'll just keep firing out Helix as long as my mana allows it. And that's it for leveling. There's going to be this POB in the video description with all the different trees, and I'll put all the skill links in there that you want at different stages. So Helix as a skill plays really nicely, if not a bit clunky, all the way up to mid-tier yellow maps as long as you've got a half decent claw, and that's good as there's things we need to pick up to progress to Lightning Strike. So I'll go through the list now. You need obviously a Vol Lightning Strike gem. You can either buy this off trade, hit side areas, or use Vol Orbs on Lightning Strike gems that you buy from Act 1. Make sure you do buy them from the Act 1 vendor because they'll have levels already built into it. It'll be like level 12 or 13 when you pick it up. You urgently need a better claw, so pick up Imperial claws that you find. They drop fairly regularly. There's no reason you won't have one, on your second or third map. And you want to craft this using Wrath essences. And depending on your budget, depends on what ones you're going to use. Screaming is absolutely fine. Early on, you're just looking for lightning damage and attack speed. If you've got a second form of any damage, brilliant, or crit chance is also a benefit. If you have an open prefix, you can just craft a second type of elemental damage. Once you get something with, say, a max roll of 230 lightning damage and some other LE damage and any attack speed at all, that's going to be absolutely fine to see you through a fairly long way, to be fair. Eventually, you obviously want to aim for high LE damage, attack speed, crit chance, and crafted pen, but that's kind of the end game weapon. Next thing you want to look out for is a dex-based shield that's item level 73 or more, because this can roll 30% to 35% ailment avoidance. To get this, the easiest way is just any harvest you get with either lightning, fire, or cold crafts, chuck your shield in. Even if you don't hit 30, you might hit 20, 25, it's better than nothing. Use that, pick up another shield, and then craft that at your next harvest. Or again, you can look for trade. I think I picked a really good one up for about 20C on day 1 last league. Next thing, you're definitely going to need a 5-link. Again, I find the easiest way to do this. Any dex or dex armor bases that I find on the floor that are 6-socketed, I put a couple of them in my stash and then look for a 5-link craft in harvest, or again, visit trade. Now, it's 2 syndicate crafts, so actually, it's 3 syndicate crafts we really need. The earlier we get them unlocked, the less you have to worry about it. The most difficult one to get is Life as Extra Energy Shield, because it's from Gravicious Body Armors, and he doesn't start on your syndicate board. So what you want to be doing at syndicate is any time you get a chance to kick someone out, doesn't matter who it is, it can be Ashley, and we'll get her back in later. We want Gravicious and we want that body armor. So anytime you get a chance to boot someone out, do it, because it means Gravicious might then come into the fold. We also want Projectile Pierce, which is a fairly common unveil anyway, so there's no reason if you do your missions, you won't pick this up. I like to craft Pierce early on if I can't get an enchant on my helmet and gloves, because it means I don't have to take the 3 extra points on the tree. These are a Divine Orb, but Divine Orbs are really, really cheap early on in the league. And then this gives you flexibility. You can craft it on the helmet or gloves, or you can take the 3 points on the tree. One of the most important things, and it's the thing that most people get wrong, is upgrade all of your gear. Yes, you might have the right links and it might have some life and evasion, resistances, whatever. If it's a low level base, the base evasion on it is going to be terrible. And this is the main reason people die, and is what most people complain about with the build, is they get to maps and then they get trounced. They're dying every map, they're dying at every boss. And the reason is they're running like some energy shield bases, an armor base, an armor energy shield base, and all that stuff combined gives them no evasion really, no armor, and energy shield is pretty pointless. Look for, when you're crafting your gear, I look to replace all of my items, even if they've got like 25% movement speed, a bit of life and resistances. The higher the bases, the more flat evasion you're going to get on them, and that just gets multiplied by grace in the evasion that we pick up on the tree. So have a look on, Period Wiki, see what the high level bases are. They'll be highlighted on normal loot filters anyway. These are what you want to craft on. The only exception is going to be 6-link, because higher decent bases can be like double or triple the money. Giving up one slot to lose a bit of evasion or armor is not a massive issue. This is the one thing I would recommend you do, is replace every bit of gear, unless you've got some absolutely mental piece of gear that you found. Like you've got, 30% movement speed boots with 80% res and life. Boots don't have a huge amount of built-in evasion anyway. Don't worry about it. But for stuff like helmets and gloves, they get quite a lot. Shield gets an absolute huge amount of evasion. And obviously body armor does as well. But as mentioned, it can be a bit pricey when you go to 6 links to pick those up. Now, just as an example, I think when I left the campaign, I had the same problem. I tried to motor through maps and I kept dying, and I had to double take because it's never happened to me when playing this skill. And then I noticed that 2 of my items didn't have evasion on, 2 were armor evasion and really low bases. And when I looked at my evasion, it was only about 11k and I had 200 armor. I just went out, picked up white stuff off the ground, crafted it with essences, put it all on, and then I went up to about 30k evasion with grace. The other thing is flasks. Get some good suffixes on your flasks. I see so many POBs where people are saying, this is my end game 150x build, and they haven't crafted the flasks when they've left the campaign. They've got like, chance to not be frozen, immune to chill, immune to shock. We get all that anyway as a raider. Craft your flasks. You want either attack speed as a suffix, evasion, armor, or crit chance. There's tons of good stuff, and it makes a massive difference. Just go into POB, play around, change your suffixes on the flask, and have a look at what difference it makes. Attack speed and crit make a huge difference to DPS. Evasion makes a massive difference to your EHP. And then the last thing of all, which we sort of touched on, is before you switch to Lightning Strike, you need Pierce on either the tree or your gear because it feels trash without it. And then the last thing, when you get your 5-link, make sure that 5th gem that you slot is Ancestral Call, because that's what brings the build together. It makes you map quicker. It makes you double hit on bosses. You have to have this gem in your links if you don't have it on your gloves. So this is your first set of goals. Once you get all this in play, you can tackle Uber Lab. And then once you've done that, you're going to be fine for late yellow, early red maps. Uber Lab can be tough on a 5-link, so I would recommend picking up as many dark shrines as you can on the route. And then when you get into Azaro's chambers, spend time kiting him so that you can disable any scary mechanics like fonts or gargoyles, because you don't want these in play in the final room. Now, I'm terrible at lab in general. So the way I tackle Azaro is I just kite him around, staying safe, hitting and moving as I go. Your Vol Lightning Strikes for some reason charge up super quick in the final lab room. So just keep an eye on them, hit and move. As soon as your 2 Vol Lightning Strikes are available, pop your flask, hit your Vol skills, burst him down. And that's the way I always do it, and I very rarely die in Uber Lab. In my last run, I think I did it at level 83 on a 5-link, and it was okay. Did feel a little bit, iffy. So if you want to be super safe, you can wait till you've got a 6-link. I will warn you though, until you get Uber Lab done, the build does feel a bit clunky. So don't worry if you start getting even a 6-link on board without Lab. If it starts to feel a bit clunky, don't worry. It gets so much better once you get Lab. The 4th Lab on this build is absolutely huge because we're getting frenzy charges. The last Ascendancy is basically increased attack speed, increased movement speed, and increased damage per frenzy charge. So literally it makes a huge difference. Your skill goes from feeling a little bit clunky and really slow to nice and quick and punchy, and from there the build just goes from strength to strength. So as I say, once you get through your lab and you get a 6-link, you're then going to be set up for red maps. Bosses are going to take a little while, so be careful. Once you've got your 6-link with Ancestral Call, your next and last step is +1 strike gloves. The easiest way to get these is with Eldritch crafting. It's one of the mods that you can roll on gloves with an Eldritch Ember. You only need to use the lesser ones because all of the ones you apply on the gloves will only give you a +1. We're not planning to take these gloves to +2, so literally use the cheapest ones possible. You can either buy a pair on trade, they're likely to be around 1x at league start, or just roll as many of these lesser ones as you can on a pair of gloves, hoping to get +1 strike. Once you've got those gloves and your 6-link, you're basically set now to farm tier 16 maps. You can do bosses, you could do guardians, you can 100% do your first 2 void stones, and then just aim for the end game gear bit by bit. The end game gear is expensive. You're probably looking at, I don't know, 30x at a guess to get the character to what I'll show you in a moment in the footage, but do it bit by bit. Aim for one piece at a time. Don't go and buy an item that slightly upgrades your items, but it isn't the end game item. Just farm, get enough currency to buy one item, buy it. Farm, buy it, or farm, get the bits to craft it yourself, whichever way you want to go. Do it item by item. Don't go for gradual upgrades. Just go straight from this setup to the end game setup, because with your +1 strike gloves and your 6 link, you're really set to go through maps. The only thing I'll say, there are 2 items that can massively boost your damage. They're Dart Ray Vector boots. If you can run these and you don't feel too squishy, I would do it. It adds a massive amount to really the speed that you map and the damage when you've got frenzy charges. If it's not something you want to use, don't bother. The other item that's really good but can be pricey early on, like 40 or 50C, is a Taming Ring. It just gives us an absolute shed load of elemental damage. With these 2 items slotted into your build replacing other items, you're probably looking at like a 25% damage increase. This is definitely then set up to then start farming. I know that because it is exactly the gear that I had last week. I didn't have Dart Rays. I had +1 strike. I had a Taming Ring. And then I had an Anoint of Divine Judgment because it's cheap. And that's all I had. And I farmed, tier 16 maps really, really quickly. In terms of the tree, it's split up into various different acts. So the first one we've got is just the Act 2. You go through the proj nodes, then you're going to have to go down here because you might need the strength to equip some of your skills. We go down and get attack speed, and then back up to get a bit of life. Again, more attack speed, back to get LE damage and resistances, then round the life wheel. When you go into around Act 4, next you're going to go up here and get these. The attack speed and accuracy are really good. Attack speed makes a skill feel less clunky, and accuracy means you really don't have to worry about it. We're then going to go up and take this LE wheel here. Now, at the end game, you're going to be going this way because you want ailment effects. Early on, if you wanted, you could go here for chance to freeze, shock, and ignite, but it will mean respecking the other node. So it's up to you what way you go. Now, this bit's optional, but I like to get as much movement speed as I can. So I go down and take this wheel here because it gives you 3, 6, 11% movement speed, cooldown of movement skills, which helps with your lock-in of Flame Dash later on, and it gives you a decent boost to evasion. This is optional. If you're not that bothered about getting through, with a bit of quicker movement speed, don't worry about it. If you really, really want to just concentrate on speed, I haven't included it in the POB. You can go up here and get Onslaught on Kill and loads of increased Onslaught effect, which does make a massive difference to your speed, but it's kind of 7 points out the way because we don't go point blank with Helix. When you're coming on to Act 5, you then want to go around here, pick up the LE damage and the LE pen, pick up the aura wheel and reservation wheel here, and then go up and get your first claw wheel with life and mana leech. Obviously, once you get to this point, you need to firmly be on a claw setup. Heading in towards Act 8, at some point, you're going to want to respec these points here because they start to fall off. And the end game, we don't want them. So you have options. If you want some life and evasion, you can go down here. But again, we are going to respec these nodes later on. If you don't want to keep doing constant respecs, you can go up here and then take these nodes out. And eventually, you're going to join up here and take these nodes out, but that's later on. So you can go whichever way you want here. So for the purpose of the POB, I've just stuck with the evasion route. And then you go into Act 10 when you end acts. You're going to go here and get the crit claw wheel. You're going to get spell suppression with crit. And you're going to get more crit here and pick up your extra frenzy charge. You're then going to come down here and get life. So this particular character would need to be level 66 if they've got all the skill point quests. And then you're going to take your Nightblade support elusive effect there. That's what you want to look like when you leave the campaign. It's really important you've got this wheel filled out because when you take your third lab, which gives you 50% ailment avoidance, this wheel gives you 20. So that means you only need to find 30 on gear once you hit maps. And then there is another couple of trees here for, again, the extra respec here because we want to free up all these points so we can go down and get these onslaught nodes for mapping. Again, these are optional. This is kind of the more squishy version. You could drop these nodes and go and fill out, like go up here and get more life. We are going to do that eventually anyway. So the final tree I'm recommending, again, there's tons of people that play this skill differently, is going to be something like this one here. So I still keep these onslaught nodes because I think they're great for mapping and I like mapping. If you're trying to build a bossing type character, you probably don't need these. We take marked for death here, which is culling strike against marked enemies, and then increase effect of marks. These have a big difference. So if we look at just this sheet DPS here for melee, we're looking at 472. If we drop those nodes, it goes down to 381. It's a big boost for only 4 points. And then the other thing we do is go up here, get Corrupted Blood, some Chaos Res, and then Ghost Dance, which you only need once you get the Energy Shield Lifecraft on your chest. And then the other thing we're filling out here at some point is going to be this Dagger Nodes with the Elusive effect. And that's kind of your level 98 tree. You can build up to that tree any way you want. If you don't think you're going to hit 98, drop nodes. So let's say, oh, I've gone the wrong way. Idiot. Right, that's more like it. Okay. So, depending on levels, your final tree is going to look something like this. Now, this is a 98 tree. If you don't think you're going to get to level 98, there's things you can drop out of it. For example, you could drop early damage. You could drop these if you can find suppression on gear. You could drop these here. Don't do a huge amount later on. If we drop those, it is 2.1% per point, which is not huge. So you just have to decide what nodes you don't want to run. If you're not going to get to 98, so that's quite high. You could drop those nodes. That's a 94 tree, and that looks more realistic. And that's kind of where you're gonna end up with your skill tree. Now, there's different ways to build this character. Lots of people go down here. They go to Frenzy here. They go up here, and then they'll get some life here. This makes the build feel a little bit smoother, but I tried leveling this way, and I found we struggle with life as it is. The issue going this way, you get no strength and you get no intelligence. So you need to take pretty much any major int and strength nodes, and then you also need to find int and strength on gear, and it just becomes a bit of a chore. If you want to respec this way later to stack frenzy charges, go for it. At the beginning, I wouldn't recommend it. So the last thing to talk about on the tree is there are 3 aspects you need to be aware of. So I mentioned a few times that for Vile Lightning Strike, you need pierce on your gear, or you need some way of your projectiles piercing. So the 3 ways realistically of doing it are a pierce enchant on your helmet. You can craft 2 lots of pierce on gloves and helmet. The easiest way to do it early on are these 3 nodes here. So it's 3 points to get here, but just make sure when you transition to Lightning Strike, you have pierce in some way or another. If you don't have it on gear and you don't have it as an enchantment on your helmet, then take these 3 nodes here, and that's going to give you all the pierce you need really for, well, the whole game. You don't really need more than 2. It's just the more you get, the better quality of life it is. But make sure you take these nodes if you don't have pierce anywhere else. The other things to look at are the 2 jewel sockets that we have available in the build. You want one to have a Watcher's Eye, and you want one to have a Lethal Pride jewel, which is a Legion jewel. So the Watcher's Eye obviously depends how much money you want to spend. You could get like a multi-mod one with different things. But really, the mod that you're looking for, which adds the most damage, is increased attack damage while affected by precision. If Watcher's Eyes are too expensive, just get a jewel with like attack speed, crit chance, life, anything that adds damage to the build. And then the last jewel, which is actually really important because it's where we get a lot of the strength from in the build, is a Lethal Pride jewel. So the Lethal Pride jewel, the way that it works is when you slot it, it has a random seeding number. And it goes up from like 1 to something like 80,000. So there's like 80 odd thousand combinations of these jewels. There's not a way of knowing what this jewel is going to do when you buy it. So you just buy the cheapest uncorrupted one and slot it into your tree. What it does, as you'll see here in Path of Building, it adds strength to all the travel nodes, and the minor nodes, it adds +4 strength. This really helps because we do need strength in the build, and this is a really good way of getting a lot of it. So if you add, for example, strength allocated on one of the smaller nodes because you didn't have enough, you slot a Lethal Pride jewel, you're not going to need that node anymore. What it also does is every major node that you have something allocated is going to just put a random stat on top of what you've already got. So if we look at this stat, it is 3% spell suppressed damage and 12% chance. If we right click, it gives you all the options that you can actually roll these. And the way you re-roll these jewels is with the Divine Orb. So early on, cheaper. Once it gets, a week into the league and Divines might be, 10 to 12C, it gets expensive. But these can add a huge boost in damage. The two nodes really that you're looking for, if you can get them in combination, is great, is 10% chance to intimidate on hit. That makes enemies take more damage. And 5% chance to deal double damage. This works really well because we apply shock to enemies. When you do that double damage, it's going to boost the shock value up on the enemy. So even though you might think, 5% chance isn't that great, once it hits, then all your subsequent hits deal more damage because the enemy has a higher shock value. And there's other good things that you can get as well. You can get increased life. You can get percentage strength, physical damage taken as fire, which can be good because we often don't have much phys mitigation. I would aim for, early on, just one node like double damage or intimidate is really good. Later on, you want a combination of double damage, intimidate, and then preferably something like, life, phys taken as fire, something like that. So they're the important parts of the tree that aren't included in the POB because it's going to be different when you need to take these pierce nodes. It might be that you transition at level 70. It might be you do 80. It might be you do 85. I don't want to put these nodes in because you don't really want to path there until you're almost ready to go because they don't really serve a purpose with Spectral Helix. That covers off the tree. I say all of these are available in the POB. This is kind of a work in progress version. There's going to be full notes here about leveling. The skills are going to have different sections as well. It'll all be in the video description that will hopefully all help you have a nice smooth league start. So we're now going to move on to the last section, which is just the end game gear and how to gear the build. If you do have any questions about the build, I'm going to stream Twitch for at least the first week of league start. Hopefully try and go live every day. Obviously you can ask questions on my YouTube video. There's going to be other references as well, which I'll come to at the end of the video, which are really good sources of help. So before we do move on, I just want to quickly get a few things out of the way which haven't been covered. And that's bandits, kill all. Pantheons is really up to you. What I like to do is run Lunaris and Yugal for mapping, and then Solaris and Tukahama for bosses, but these are really up to you. In terms of Ascendancy order, it's Where the Poacher, Quartz Infusion, Avatar the Vow, and then finally Avatar of the Slaughter. So I'm going to move on to the endgame gear. Now with this guide, I'm not going to do an Omniscience version because I don't know how rare Omniscience is going to be in terms of drop rate, and I don't want to gear a character around an item that might be, really, really expensive early league. So for players that aren't aware, Omniscience is an insane endgame amulet that gives you Ellie Pen and Ellie Resistance dependent on the amount of Omniscience you have. Omniscience is essentially your attributes, so strength, dex, intelligence. Anywhere you get increased strength, you get increased omniscience. If you get percentage increased strength, you get percentage increased omniscience. The only thing about it is it's done on almost like single mods are taken into account. So 30 dex is exactly the same as plus 30 dex and strength because it's just plus 30. But, I don't need to go into it because this build's not going to rely on it. But if it is reasonably priced at league start, it's a really easy way to pump up an absolute load of damage. So if it is a route you want to go, maybe check out some PoE Ninja profiles. So the gear I'm going to go through, as I say, is not reliant on Omni. It can clear everything in the game, bar level 30 simulacrums. The build can be made to do 30 simus fairly easy, but it takes good investment. There's like people I know have put 100, 150 X into the build, and you can basically go in a simulacrum and guarantee that you're going to clear 30 waves. I never take builds that far. I'm more like 20, 30, 40 investment and I move on to another character. I don't count wave 30 simulacrums as necessarily content that I want my builds to complete. It will do, your Uber Elders, Cirrus. It will get your Void Stones. It will do the Feared. It will do all this sort of stuff for 20 to 40x. Simulacrum is really specific. You have to build your character in really specific ways to get it working. If it is something you're keen on doing, there'll be a link to our Discord which covers really lightning strike builds, but you can join and talk about other builds because there's loads of players that have done 30 simulacrums regularly, both with Omniscience variants and normal variants of the build. So check out the link in the description. So onto the gear itself that I would recommend. And the way I build characters is really they're primarily built for mapping, but they can do bossing. So notice in the skill tree I take Onslaught nodes. A lot of people don't take them. I take them because it just gets you through maps quicker, but it doesn't really do anything for like single boss fights. So the gear I recommend, Helm, 100% you want a Blizzard Crown, and you want that with the Lightning Strike enchant that pierces additional enemies. They're going to be expensive. You're probably looking between 3 to 10x. It really depends on how many are on the market. You want to roll it with Greed Essences until you get really high life with resistances. And if you can pull something like Spell Suppression, that's really good as well. Body armor is up to you. There's a few different choices. I would recommend a Hunter Warlord base with attacks have X chance to crit and gain an endurance charge every second when you're hit. As I say, we don't have a lot of phys mitigation, so getting endurance charges into the build helps massively. Now, as this is an Awaken Orb item, you're sort of in the lap of the gods to how the stats land. You can obviously do some metacrafting after if you've got, like an open suffix. You can do things can't be changed to try and get the chest to exactly as you want it. But ideally, at the end of this chest, you're going to have gain an endurance charge on hit, crit chance, life, open prefix to craft that the life as extra energy shield craft that we mentioned about picking up from Gravicious earlier on. Now, the other option which I went for, because I just really wanted to map, I wasn't that bothered about endurance charges. So I just went for a really, really good normal chest that I could then put Eldritch modifiers on. And the two I'd recommend are Grace has increased effect, and then +2 to maximum all resistances, or your auras have increased effect. They're both really good defensively, and the aura one also works offensively. For your gloves, you want a decent pair of rolled gloves with like life, attack speed, whatever you want on it, resistances, and then you use Eldritch Orbs to get +1 strike and +1 pierce. Now, at end game, you can then try and push that to +2. It feels better for mapping, but it doesn't do anything for bossing, so +1 really is fine. For the amulet, the way I still gear the build, which I've done for a few leagues, is an All's Uprising amulet with either Anger or Determination has no reservation. And this just means it's easy to run a offensive aura with Determination and Grace and not have to worry about mana. Now, if you don't want to do this or it's too expensive, you don't want to go Omniscience, there's two options really for this. The first, but then it might be as expensive as getting an All's Uprising, is just get a mega DPS amulet. So you want like T1 flat damage, T1 LE damage with attack, some crit chance, all that kind of stuff in it. It's probably going to make up for Anger. You can drop Anger and then you can run Determination anyway. The other option, if you've got the free slots in your gear, is you can actually run Anger as a Divine Blessing aura and link that with Life Tap and increase duration. So what Divine Blessing does is it allows you to run basically an aura. Instead of reserving it, it takes a chunk and then that's the skill and it runs for say 20 seconds. If you do it on your mana, when you activate it, it removes all your other skills. But if you do it on life and it's the only skill you've got that will allocate life, then all your other auras will stay intact. Your life will basically drop to like half. You use a life flask and then you've got that skill for like say 20 seconds. Takes a bit of managing because you need to keep activating it. You also need to make sure you're using your life flask after. I've not tried this end game. I've just tried it mapping. It works, but I like to have 1 to 2 button builds. I don't want to have to worry about stuff like that, but it is an option. For rings, Mark of the Elder and Shaper Influence ring are still what I go for. You get a lot of damage from Mark of the Elder. On a Shaper ring, you've got a choice. If you're lacking resistances, just get a ring with an absolute ton of resistances on it. If you don't need resistances, then go for as much damage as you can get in that ring. For a belt, Stygian Vibes with life, strength if you need it. If not, go resistances, and then you want a high roll for LE damage to attacks. And then you can put a jewel in here that's got loads of flat damage to claws and attacks. For boots, we keep it fairly simple. Life, movement speed, resistances, and spell suppression is a bonus. As I said, you could use Dark Ray Vectors as unique boots. They're a really good option for mapping, but they suck on bosses because what they do is they reduce the duration of your frenzy charges by half. If you've got a boss that's phased, you're going to run out of frenzy charges totally. Then you've got like no movement speed whatsoever. It feels pretty bad. For shield, you want a dex base, high life, maximum resistances, 30% ailment immunity as a minimum. And if you can get spell suppression, it's a nice bonus. I would either go for +2 max res or spell suppression. It's probably hard to get both with ailment immunity because it's likely to cost a small fortune. And then lastly on the claw, what you're looking for is really high lightning damage, so T2 or T1, another form of LE damage, high crit chance, and high attack speed, ideally with an open prefix to craft Ellie Pen. If these are really expensive, your other option is to have a search around the market for a Fractured Claw. Fractured just means that there'll be one stat on there that cannot be changed on the claw. What you're looking for is either a high lightning damage roll or high attack speed. You're looking for either, base-wise, I would go Noble, Imperial, or Gemini. I wouldn't go any different to that. So if you got one with high fractured lightning damage, you would roll Essences of Zeal, which are attack speed ones, until you got a really good combo. If it's the other way around and it had high attack speed, you'd run Deafening Essences of Wrath, again, until you get the combo of mods that you're looking for. Just aim for one piece at a time when you're starting out, as the base version is enough to out and go T16 maps and start earning currency. So before I close out the video, I just want to go through flasks. So if you are running Onslaught on your tree, you don't need to use a silver flask. These are the kind of budget flasks that I would recommend. You can obviously go Bottled Faith to get an absolute ton more damage. I didn't put it in this build because I just didn't want to spend the 8, 10, 15x. I can't remember what they were at the time. They are very, very good though, and they will pump out a ton of damage. So the flasks I go for are standard life flasks with Corrupted Blood immunity on it. We already have Corrupted Blood immunity from the tree, but we still need a way to stop, the normal bleeds. I'll run a Quicksilver flask, and on that, you either want something like attack speed, movement speed. This isn't ideal because it's got reduced duration, but because it maps really quick, you don't really need the flask to last any longer than like 3 seconds. We have a Diamond flask for extra crit chance. If you've got 100% crit without it, you can obviously run something else. Again, have something decent on a suffix, like crit chance, armor, evasion. Then I run a Jade flask. Again, make sure it's got decent suffixes on it. And then an armor flask, again, with decent suffixes. For the flasks, I enchant them all using the crafting bench with use when charges reach full. This basically makes the build, when you've got it geared, a one-button build. You don't need to use your totem for anything. You only need to use your Vol Lightning Strike at bosses, and even then, you don't really need to. So you can literally just go through the map, running around. Your flasks automatically use every time they get full. The only thing you need to do is right-click to kill enemies. Super comfy and really, really quick. So that covers off the flask. So let's just go and close out the video. Now, that kind of covers off all the gear. I've already gone through the gems in the leveling section, but they're on screen now to screenshot, and they will be in the POB. Have a play around with the gems, because depending on what sort of gear you have and what sort of damage, it might be that there are slightly better DPS gems that you can use. So plug it all into Path of Building and have a look when you've got your gear up and running. Now, as I mentioned, that covers everything, but I just wanted to go through the extra resources that you can use at League Start if you're going to follow this build. So firstly, I have a written guide on the PoE forums that's up to date. Link's going to be in the description. Feel free to ask any questions either on there or on YouTube. I will always respond, but in the first few days of League Start, when I'm busy playing and I'm also trying to put out new content, it might be a delay in me replying. And then lastly, I'm going to link my Twitch below. I'm going to be streaming League Start for the first week of the league, as I'm not working. So I'm definitely going to be live at launch, and then on the Saturday and Sunday, and then I'm going to find some time to stream Monday to Friday as well. So just pop along if you want to see how the build's going, or if you want to ask questions. Now, saying that was going to be a short video, it's actually gone really, really long, but I do always like to give all the details so people have a smooth League Start. Now, I will bring out some more videos once we get full details on the Atlas tree to run through how I'm going to be using my skill points, how I plan to make money early on, and what some strategies are that I think you could utilize to make some real bank early on. Now, if you did like the video, please like and consider subscribing. It's really going to help the channel grow and keep me busy and happy. As always, thank you so much for watching. Take care and see you in the next video. That was a long one.